2 minutes in, let's get started. Tonight we have a really special webinar, and I'm very excited with the joining of all forces when it comes to women's health and all of the different key players within this realm. And I'm very lucky to be joined tonight by Rhiannon White and Hannah Parish from Clue and Oura. Guys, do you want to give yourselves an introduction just so everyone knows who you are, and we can then get the webinar started?
Sounds great. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming. We are so excited to have the opportunity to have this conversation because it's such a overdue and important conversation for all of us. I'm Rhiannon, as Helen said. I'm the CEO here at Clue. We're a period and cycle tracking app with over 10 million monthly active users across the world. And this is a really exciting and important area for us. So really looking forward to the conversation.
I'm so honored to be on the screen with these two heavyweights in such an important conversation around perimenopause and menopause. I'm Hannah Parish. I'm the director of international commercial growth here at Oura, with a special focus on women's health. And thank you to everyone for taking time on a Friday afternoon to join us. And definitely Helen, for sure. Thank you for hosting this and bringing us all together.
Amazing. I'm really excited to get just talking about some of the different aspects that make all of us very excited. We really thought that this was the most incredible use of each of our expertise to talk about how technology can be used to really fill the massive void when it comes to research and care in the perimenopausal space. My name is Dr. Helen O'Neill, and I'm an associate professor in reproductive and molecular genetics, and I'm CEO and founder of Hertility Health, where we are an end-to-end clinical solution with a diagnostic test, with clinical treatments, egg freezing, prescriptions, ultrasound scans, gynecologists, and then onward care. So it gives me great pleasure to really get started in how we as entities can really improve some of the different aspects about perimenopausal care. But before I do that, I really want to just first pay homage to the question around what perimenopause and menopause is. And just because I feel in my 10 years of lecturing, you will never do anyone a disservice by explaining the simplicity of things. If everyone is on the same page, then everyone is starting from the same point. So I'm going to start by just explaining a little bit about what is perimenopause. Really, when we're talking about menopause, when people are always talking about menopause, in the majority of times, they're actually talking about perimenopause. So what we're doing when we talk about menopause, it's literally a retrospective definition that occurs that you are officially perimenopausal if you have been 12 months without a period. So 12 months after your last menstrual period, you are officially in menopause. Everything up to that is perimenopause. And this is really encompassing a huge physiological, psychological, endocrinological transition that your body is going through to get to the point of menopause. That is that full year without any menstrual cycles. So there's a huge range of ages that people tend to enter into menopause, and therefore the journey into perimenopause and menopause for everybody is quite different. And we're going to all share a little bit of our data and how different actually the data can be to what a textbook would define as symptoms or prevalence of different symptoms associated with perimenopause. And what's really important to notice is that actually different people will enter that at different ages, whether it's a different ethnicity, will experience different symptoms at different rates. So that is crucial to understanding your own rate of, I guess, ovarian reserve decline into perimenopause. And one of the stark things that always hits people is the numbers. When we look at the numbers, the average length of perimenopause into menopause is around 4 years. However, for some, it can last up to 12. We know that from a workplace standpoint, 8 in 10 menopausal women are working. So this is a significant impact on your workplace or workforce. So if you think that you are alone in the workforce, you are not. And if your workplace is not doing anything for you, let us know. They should be, because it makes a significant impact to overall ROI, every aspect of a business, investing in women's health at every life stage. What's crazy is that 90% of people will report, who are going through this, will report that their symptoms impact their work. And in the next few slides, you will see why. And yet we rarely are discussing it. It's finally getting its moment that people are starting to talk about this, but it stands to reason that we should have been talking about this for a lot longer, because over 1 million women reported that they will leave the workforce because of menopause symptoms. And when you think the average age is 51, you are at your prime when it comes to everything that you know. You are the expert. You have been around the block. You've learned it all. You are really the most valuable employee in a business that actually businesses might actually let go of. So it's worth bearing those things in mind. But when we look at the different reproductive life stages, we see that premenopause is anything up to 45. Perimenopause, hi Toby, classic male interruption. I don't think he meant to join. Perimenopause is 45 to 55, and menopause is around, average age is around 51. But what we see is actually we are seeing far earlier ages where people are reporting perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms. So it's really worth bearing in mind that these textbook numbers could probably do with revisiting when we look at today's real world statistics, especially when we look at the earlier end of the spectrum. And that is that the average age for puberty used to be around 12, 13, and now we're seeing in some places the average ages are around 8 and 9 years old. So when we see that puberty is now precocious, we're actually looking to see that on the other end, perimenopause and menopause is starting to be a bit more precocious too. So anything still defined before, but any menopause before the age of 45 is known as early menopause. It's also worth bearing in mind your family history. So I love a molecule. I am a molecular geneticist, but the reason why I want to pay homage to these beautiful structures is that they are the most profound and powerful elements on Earth, because we are all very hormonal. And I wear my hormones with pride. I will acknowledge with pride just how hormonal I am, both the positive and the negative. But really, the one that I want to focus on here is estrogen. Estrogen is almost sometimes associated with being the feminine hormone, or something that would like, oh, high in estrogen, meaning something a little bit weaker than what it really is, which is a very powerful hormone that is responsible not just for our reproductive cycles or our fertility or our menstrual cycles. Estrogen is a key player in our bone health, in our cardiovascular health, in our neurocognitive health. And when estrogen starts to decline, it has a profound impact on many different organs in our body and many different aspects of our overall health. So while we tend to think of testosterone equally as being a male hormone, testosterone is actually, we produce 3 to 4 times more testosterone than estrogen before menopause. So testosterone is vital as well for our overall health. So when these hormones, each of them, start to decline, as we go from our mid-30s to our 50s, we really do notice the impact on our overall body. And I'm just going to do a whistle-stop tour just to give an idea of just how important estrogen is. But firstly, I think it's important to look at the menopausal transition in a graph. And this is purely just showing your estrogen levels. So what you're seeing here is that premenopausal, you have quite high estrogen levels. In your perimenopausal, it is an overall decline, but there is quite a significant amount of fluctuation. And the reason I highlight that is that some people, that's why I always recommend people to test test their hormone levels when they're in that premenopausal phase. Know when you are at your best. So often people come to us and they say, I'm healthy, I don't think I need anything. And actually, it's when you're healthy that you should really invest in knowing what is that mark that makes you tick, because we're all quite different. Some of us have naturally higher levels of estrogen or naturally higher levels of testosterone. Others have naturally more low levels. So knowing where you are on that makes you feel good. If you start to dip from that, it really helps you to understand, actually, while I may technically be within range within this hormone, I know for me that this is not where I'm feeling my best. So that range tends to vacillate quite a lot in perimenopause. But again, understanding your own level and where you're good is actually quite important. And you'll see estrogen really just drops off in menopause and postmenopause. So what is the impact of a decline in estrogen? It's this is not a Halloween slide. This is genuinely how we have just underestimated and ignored the profound impact of perimenopause and menopause. So the different symptoms are both cognitive and vasomotor. We have bodily changes, mobility changes, pelvic symptoms, and psychological changes. So one of the things that I always say frustrates me about when we describe the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, we tend to say hot flushes, brain fog, night sweats. But actually, if you were to describe them through their medically defined terms, vasomotor symptoms or a vasomotor attack or a neurocognitive inhibition, people might take it a little bit more seriously than thinking somebody's just getting a hot flush or just having brain fog. It truly does diminish how profound that night sweat, that hot flush is on your overall body, because estrogen is a key regulator of your vasomotor ability. In other words, the ability for your veins to loosen and contract is a really important thing in establishing our temperature maintenance. And when you start to lose that through this change, or when you see significant changes in your estrogen, that is when you get these vasomotor symptoms like a hot flush or night sweats. And they are they are an all-encompassing experience. Equally, when it comes to pelvic symptoms, when we think of estrogen, we think of it flowing through our body all over our bloodstream. But actually, there are areas where it is locally lost, and that local loss of estrogen can impact that region, such as pelvic symptoms like pain during sex caused by vaginal dryness. And actually, those things can quite readily be addressed once we're aware of them. I can't tell you how many women go through unnecessary rounds of antibiotics when they could just, for urinary tract infections, when they could just take local estrogen on their vulva to reduce those symptoms. So it's quite understanding that we would see psychological changes throughout this period, because we are many times women do not know what's happening to them. Now, thankfully, we as three entities are trying to really push through this, give women not just information and education, but key metrics about themselves that help them better understand these bodily changes, and hopefully then get a better grasp and not suffer so many of the psychological impacts that this might have. So I will talk a little bit about the health implications just as a summary, because we think of perimenopause as just being a state of transition into menopause, but actually what you have to think about is the long-term health implications, and actually investing from an early age in both understanding, treating, and really preparing your body, like bracing yourself and understanding your own body to say, I am going to go into this well informed, and I'm going to go into this and make all of the changes that I can make to prevent anything more negative happening, is really profound and powerful. So these are cardiovascular conditions, urinary incontinence, changes to sexual health, osteoporosis, genitourinary symptoms, and weight changes. All of these, if we know they are going to happen and we know the consequences of ignoring them, actually there's so much we can do, even down to just starting to build your body in terms of strength training, really starting to get your strength up. Strength training has a far more impactful outcome on our bone health than taking vitamin D and calcium. We start to lose those in our late 30s. So it's really important to know that the little things that you can do that can actually help you live for a much longer time. So I could talk all day and all night. We have plenty other webinars about menopause. If there are other things that you want to know, we have a Q&A section in the end. But we just wanted to talk a little bit about how testing your hormones and understanding them, how tracking your symptoms and your menstrual cycles, and understanding now when things start to change for you, and then also looking at some of those heart rate metrics through wearables can really help you become an expert in yourself. So these are some of the slides from Oura. Are they from Oura or Clue?
It's me. I'll jump in here.
Rhiannon, sorry, so sorry. So Clue are going to share some of their findings from their report as well.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Dr. Helen, for taking us through that and for helping us ground ourselves in the science around this, because I think so much of the mystery and the fact that people don't talk about it makes it feel both scary and overwhelming, and also somehow a little shameful, but it's not. It's a natural, understandable, biologically determined phase that we all go through. And if we can understand the science, then we can help understand, as you say, those little things that we can do that help us improve it. At Clue, because we're about tracking the cycle, we tend to be kind of we see people at the top of the funnel as they start to experience these subtle changes that might say that something is happening. And Helen's point around, it's really important to understand your baseline and have a record of what your normal is, so that when things start to change, you can really sense check. Because what we tend to find, we spend a lot of time researching with our users, is that there are sort of two questions around this that come up. And the first is it perimenopause? Because frankly, often when these symptoms start happening to people, people are trying to, in the middle of very busy lives, trying to hold down jobs, raise families, care for older family members, trying to just get everything done that needs to be done in life. And you kind of don't always know, like, is this perimenopause or am I just tired because life is really tiring? And yet actually, if it is perimenopause, as Helen was saying, there are things that we can do. And so having that record is really important. We spend a lot of time, as I mentioned, talking to our user community and trying to understand what they understand about our bodies. And the thing that we found around perimenopause is that even though we're all talking about it a lot now, or it feels like it's having a moment, this is data from very recent, just over the last few months, from our user community. And the really sad thing is that actually 90% of them do not feel well informed about perimenopause and menopause. Most of them can't talk about the difference between the two. Most of them, 70%, not even sure what it is. And some really key point here is that for most of them, it's not openly discussed in their families. And Helen also made a point around one's family history, and this is really important. And so knowing and understanding what happens in your family and having those conversations can be really useful. But even worse is that most of our user community had never had a conversation with their healthcare provider about it. We really have to take this into our own hands and really collect our own data and be our own research scientists. And this is why I really love the conjunction of these three products together, because between the three of them, we can really kind of almost vertically integrate and understand at all the stages of what we're doing, what's going on for our bodies. Next slide, please. And we see this very much so in terms of as, these vasomotor symptoms, which have a huge flow-on effect. I mean, we all know how really deeply it undermines our quality of life when our sleep is undermined. And we really strongly see this in tracking and in our tracking data. So even if people are wrestling with that question, am I in perimenopause or not? We see very strongly in people within the age group who probably are approaching it or are in it, all the tracking data around sleep starts to change for the worse, and in a very significant and substantive way. So a lot shorter sleep, a lot more disrupted sleep, a lot more discomfort in sleep, and a lot more with trouble falling and staying asleep. And I think you'll see something similar in the Oura data. And then the flow-on impact in terms of mood and energy and just general how you feel about life is also tracked very strongly in our product, and we see that coming through in the user data. I mentioned there were two questions that people asked. The first is, is this really happening? And the second one is, when is this fresh hell going to end? And this is the point around tracking and understanding so that we can, as Helen says, like actually figure out that we're not helpless, we can do something about it. And that's what is so important, and why we have this collective belief in the power of data. At Clue, we really believe, and I think this is true for both Hertility and Oura, we believe that tracking equals data, and data equals insight, and insight equals agency. And this is the thing, right? We can't change that this will happen to us, but if we have agency, we can change how it happens and how we experience it. All right, Hannah, I think you're on from here.
I mean, just heck yes to everything that the both of you have said. In fact, it's so wonderful that we really kind of see all of this coming to the forefront now as well. Now is the time for people to start really understanding what perimenopause is, how it can impact your life, and also, for women of perimenopause age to stop gaslighting themselves. There's nothing I can do about this. It is just happening to me. I am just getting old. No. What we've actually done is, and I'll go through some of this, but Oura this week launched a perimenopause impact report, because we looked back through our data, and to both Helen and Rhiannon's points around know your data, understand your data in order to be able to take it to your doctor and do something about it, to take those learnings. So what we actually did was we looked at over 100,000 female Oura members for over a year. And we looked at that data. And what we came out with was real insights. And those insights came into a report overall. We made some discoveries. We made some changes to our app because of it, which is really exciting. And what we really find is that we think that there can be a lot of opportunity for women to start to, as Rhiannon said, have agency. We can really take action, learn the data that's important, understand what it means, and then go do something about it. So with this new perimenopause impact report, we'll go through in the next few slides, we have added 17 new tags to help you track your symptoms. And then to get even deeper, go into the Clue app and really start to track. Rhiannon, what do you have? 300 or so symptom tracks and the symptoms you can track in there.
Yeah, just under that. Yeah.
Incredible. Understand your data. We'll talk through a little bit of what you can see biometrically as well as what you can track. Sharing that then with your doctor in a way that your doctor will actually listen and hear, because what we find is that 44% of women actually in doctors' offices don't feel heard, don't feel listened to. And what we find is that if they're able to put their data that they have been tracking on a piece of paper in front of their doctor saying, this is the data I have, doctors are more willing to listen because they understand that they have something they can see and test. And then obviously, you've got a whole set of ecosystem and partners around. You've got Oura as this wearable that really tracks all of your biometrics and starts to get deeply into your symptom tracking. Clue has incredible algorithms with incredible symptom tracking that goes deeper than anything else that you would want. And Hertility, for example, from a hormone testing perspective. And you can take all of that together and then really go to a clinician that believes you. Hertility's got a great set in the UK, and there are numbers in other countries where you can really get that advice and start to talk to a doctor that really understands you. So let's go into some of that Oura data.
Hannah,
So,
sorry to interrupt. Can you just go slightly into the microphone a little bit? It's just a little bit hard to hear you. And there are people saying they want to hear you.
Better?
Yeah, thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you. So we do see that perimenopause impacts sleep. We know that women are losing up to 2 hours of sleep. Perimenopausal women are losing up to 2 hours of sleep per week, which is really incredible. We're seeing a reduction in REM sleep, which is the one that helps your brain kind of reset every single day. That's where you dream, of up to 9%. Deep sleep, which is really what helps your body kind of get back to reset, that's up to 18% difference and decrease, which is really actually quite stunning. We actually see also a deep decrease in sleep efficiency. And what that means is how much time you spend in bed versus how much time you actually spend sleeping. Because what we also find, and you can track this in the Oura app, is that movement and women actually get up out of bed a lot more often. Restless leg syndrome is something we see that increases during perimenopause, and you can track that in your Oura app as well. So we do actually see sleep decrease because of insomnia, because of sleep apnea with weight gain, but also, hot flashes. Hot flashes are a real impact to women's sleep. And why is sleep so important? Well, if you wake up groggy, everyone knows that it impacts the entire rest of your day. But if you wake up groggy day after day after day, it starts to impact your entire life. It starts to impact your work. And a Canadian statistic, which I love, is that we see a loss of 10% of the working women's workforce in perimenopause age. And those are women who are bringing the topmost value. Those are women who have the most experience, and we're losing them early because we don't do enough about it. I think Helen was talking about this as well. Let's jump into the next slide. But it's not just sleep. HRV declines, and HRV is your heart rate variability. And we could talk for hours just about heart rate variability itself, but it's really the difference in the space between your heart rates. we are seeing an HRV decline in our 100,000 users that we looked at from 20 to 30% in early perimenopausal women. In fact, this is one of my favorite graphs of a perimenopausal woman that we find. And right at the end in March here, she actually had her perimenopause diagnosis from her doctor. But really what we do see is that HRV declines can potentially lead to increased risks of cardiovascular disease, cardiovascular events, and a number of other sort of stress-related issues. So we all know that this age is stressful, especially when you're in the sandwich generation, carrying up and carrying down. We don't need anything on top of that. And there are things that you can do about it with the support of a clinician. Next slide. And so, what are people tagging? Rhiannon kind of shared some of this information as well, but we see that women are tagging that they're tired, that there's an increase in insomnia. Headaches are a big one. Migraines, and not only are women having more headaches, but they're getting worse. Hot flashes, of course. Night sweats, absolutely. But actually what we see are things like in the Oura data, we actually see things like nausea are actually being tracked more by younger women, which gives us a lot of insight into how younger women are feeling, especially during pregnancy and that type of thing. But all of this to say, when you start to track your data, as Helen and Rhiannon have been saying, you really start to get to know yourself. And what you learn is it's not you. It could be perimenopause. Next slide.
So just to share, I guess we're all speaking the same language here. We also looked at our data. So we have data from 520,000 women who've come to Hertility, who've done a fully extensive health assessment, and the Hertility health assessment has essentially internally embedded algorithms that help us to determine what your relative risk is of 18 different pathologies that can impact your fertility or your reproductive health. So it's a gynecological screening tool. And the first question that we ask women is, what brings you here? Are you just curious about your reproductive health? Are you planning babies in the future? Are you actively trying to conceive? Are you experiencing symptoms? Or do you think you're perimenopausal, or are you menopausal? And we often say it's quite misleading that Hertility sounds like fertility and people think we're just a fertility test, when actually we're much more of a gynecology test. But it's amazing, in the absence of us ever pushing out to a perimenopausal audience, we still have had almost 30,000 women say, I think I'm perimenopausal. Now, when we dug into the data about why these women thought they were perimenopausal, when we look at all the different symptoms associated with perimenopause, what's amazing about the symptoms that are most frequently reported, if you look at the top ones, fatigue, anxiety, irritability, depressive or low mood, brain fog, headaches, migraines, all of these are north of the hemisphere. These are not things that are happening to do with our bleeding. They're not cramping. They're not menstrual related. Actually, the majority of symptoms reported by women who consider themselves or wonder whether they are going through perimenopause are actually related to their mood and their mental health. So we actually see this. We also published a report called the Reproductive Report, and in it was a full section about how mental health and menstrual health are inextricably linked. And that is because the majority of symptoms that are reported by women who think they're going through perimenopause are actually to do with mental health. And so to me, what that really shows you is there is this almost nebulous area that is so hard to reach because, as you said, women gaslight themselves. They wonder, am I tired because I'm doing everything? Yes, you are, but you're also tired because your body is going through this incredible change. Am I anxious because my parents are sick and my kids are sicker? Yes, but also you're anxious because you have it's almost like the luteal phase of your menstrual cycle, but elongated for years, right? And everyone fears that luteal phase, that premenstrual phase. That's because your estrogen is so low. And if you think about a sustained amount of time with that low estrogen, it's like your luteal or low teal, as we joke, for quite a long time. Of course, you're going to feel that irritability and depressive or low mood. It's almost like a premenstrual low mood that you're going to get. And yet, when we looked at the clinical guidelines for how we actually diagnose somebody with perimenopause, actually those guidelines really do us a disservice, because what they don't take into account are these top reported symptoms. They really just look at your age, number one, and they look at other defining metrics like a reduced or an FSH reading, 2 FSH readings. But actually what we see from here, only 6%. So when we looked at, this was done a long time ago, when we looked at 8,000 women who self-reported as perimenopausal, according to the guidelines, only 6% of them would be actually qualified as that. So that's taking into account what the guidelines call as a definition of perimenopause. And so you could say that narratives about menopause in the media are leading women to incorrectly self-diagnose, but actually what I think is more important is that there is a huge percentage of women who recognize there is something going on with them, and nobody is willing to give them a definition because they fall in between two stools. They're not quite of that perimenopausal age range. They're not quite of that that early age range. They're in between. It's like they're pre-perimenopausal. And that's why I think the value of data is finally going to put some metrics to this pre-perimenopausal phase, where we don't quite have a clinical definition of it. We can't quite capture what it means to be in this phase. And yet women know their own bodies very well. And actually, that's one of the things that we've seen from our data. Is one of the questions we ask is, have you ever been diagnosed with any of the following conditions? And we have a very extensive list of conditions, reproductive health conditions and autoimmune and beyond. And one of the boxes is no, I haven't, but I suspect something's up. And whenever a woman ticks that box, no, I have never been diagnosed with any of these things, but I suspect something's up, they are always right. They will always have something out of range. Their hormones will be off. They'll have a thyroid condition. They will have something significantly wrong that warrants, that will either give them a clinical diagnosis or will get them, give them an idea of where their hormones are. And that to me is the most powerful symptom in the world, is saying, I think there's something up. But imagine we can actually then track our symptoms, and then look at our heart rate variability, witness these changes over time, and to say, this is something that we now know we can actually put data to. So this is, to me, as much as this collaboration is wonderful to reach more women, as like Rhiannon put, a beautifully vertically integrated system, it's actually also the most incredible opportunity for us to research and fill gaps within. Everyone says I light up when I talk about research, and it's true, because that is what makes me happy, is being able to actually really educate and inform using real world data. So I think this is the lost number of women who we are going to help find their way. We're actually at the end of the webinar part, but we're going to move into a conversation. This is supposed to be a QR code here, but it's not showing up. But we have 3 different codes for tonight. We've got a code for a Hertility services. We have a consultation with perimenopause specialists or menopause specialists, where you can also get a blood test, and you can also get a prescription should you require it. It's actually an amazing service, because you can get have a conversation with a clinician, and that day pick up a prescription from your nearest pharmacy. And this is really what I wanted to build, was something that we just can access in our busy lives. And then Oura members who are new to Clue Plus are eligible to receive a free month subscription. So you have to go to the Clue sign-in page and you enter this code here, maybe take a screenshot. And then for Oura, there's a 10% off Oura, and then Hannah is going to share the link here. We also have, for anyone who's done a fertility test or hasn't, we have our own app, which is really like a gynecologist in your pocket, where you can track your symptoms and your cycles, but moreover, you can look at your hormone readings, look at your levels, and it will give you insights into all of the different hormonal changes that you're experiencing, and any symptoms that you log, it's going to give you insights, and you can book through the app to speak with a specialist, or to book any additional blood tests, or to book an ultrasound scan. So really, these powers combined is finally there's no such thing as the Holy Grail, but I think there's hopefully we'll build the Holy Gynae and get women some answers. No, we will get to some questions now. Hopefully I can find some of these. Hang on. Okay, great. I'm going to try and moderate and read these questions and answer them at the same time. So the first one is actually, is the age of perimenopause linked to maternal family history, or can it be linked to paternal family history too? We more often see that it is linked to maternal family history when women when women's mothers go through early menopause, their daughters tend to as well. So that is definitely worth considering. It's amazing how many women we see with low ovarian reserve say to us, actually, I was conceived through IVF and my parents struggled to have me. So there's definitely this familial history. Hold on. No, there's a bunch of things about telling Hannah louder at the back, please. What are the things that companies and employers should be doing to support those in perimenopause? Everything. Invest in the women in your workforce and it will return so much. We created a reproductive impact calculator, which helps us to calculate the cost of reproductive health if ignored in your workplace. And when we first brought through, and this was an incredibly well-constructed calculator. We worked with BCG to create it, and the numbers were so shocking, it almost didn't seem real. Like, you were almost like, no, there's no way that could cost every workplace that much when we looked at how many women of different ages were in each workplace. So almost anything is helpful, but I think offering specific and dedicated reproductive health support is invaluable to your employees. I guess you guys agree.
I would add on to that, Helen. I'll lean in and shout. Hopefully that works. That it's also important to not only think that it's the importance and the job of the women employees to ensure that this is offered, but also benefits, right? A lot of the fixes and the visits should be covered by benefits and currently aren't. So continue to raise your voices with your HR departments to ask to ensure to get things like fertility treatments and perimenopause consultations, conversations, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, HRT overall, as well as supplements covered by your benefits provider. It is something that we need as we continue to grow older, and it's something that should be covered. So continue to raise your voices about that.
For sure. Somebody has asked what's being done to move away from the one-size-fits-all estrogen menopause treatments, and is a pharmacogenetic solution possible in this area in the future? Absolutely. One of the trials that we are beginning very shortly is going to be looking at how we can dose modulate our HRT depending on our own baseline measurements. And I think this is something that will be really exciting to collaborate with you guys on as well, because what we'll see is we'll see symptoms being reported, but we'll also see as a result of those dose dependent measures of HRT. To me, it blows my mind that estrogen or hormone replacement therapy or menopause therapy, as people say now, is a one-size-fits-all, that we don't measure people's underlying hormones over a period of time to get their baseline average before giving them a prescription. Women are told, take this. If it feels good, keep taking it. If it doesn't, come back, and then they might test. And that is the most untitrated approach to just clinical pharmacology I've ever witnessed. So that's why we're going to be announcing a research partnership where we will be really looking at how we can measure an appropriate dose for women. So watch this space and please sign up to be part of the trial, because every woman's data helps everybody else. And also, hopefully, we're going to get, more than just estrogen and progesterone, that we'll have more readily available testosterone and everything else. So I have had weight gain, even though I'm not eating more or moving less. What causes this? I've never had weight gain problems before. Yeah, it has to be either stress or perimenopause related. Yeah, it is perimenopause and estrogen related. Unfortunately, you could do absolutely nothing to your diet, change it in no way, but that decline in estrogen it affects the adiposity of our fat, our reserves, where we store fat. It even changes your blood pressure, and so people end up with massive increases in their cholesterol in the absence of any dietary changes whatsoever. So that's why I think measuring, I'm on the wrong hand, measuring heart rate variability, measuring your blood pressure, measuring your symptoms and your weight is really important. But then being able to actually counter that through strength training, through whatever therapy you deem fit for you. A lot of people are very pro hormonal therapy. Other people want to do non-hormonal. There are plenty of options either way. I don't want to push anyone either way. But I do think that replacing a hormone that is being lost is an intuitive solution. So with all the data your companies are collecting, do you anticipate a change in guidelines within the health systems of UK, DE, USA, etc.? Anyone want to answer that?
I mean,
I can.
Yeah, no, you go
Rhiannon.
ahead, Hannah. No, you go ahead.
I'll go first, and then you go second. I don't think we know enough now. I think the guidelines are going to have to change, and I think that the more information and the more science we do, the more that our governments are going to start to listen and start to change guidelines and start to change how we teach our doctors in medical school. I think now is just the beginning. But Rhiannon, over to you.
No, I was basically going to say something very similar, but I think that that change will only come through the research partnerships and through, Helen was talking about the study that they have coming up, and the Oura and Clue are working with Berkeley to do a study around perimenopause and perimenopausal symptoms. And I think we need to push into the research branch more. I think consumer products such as Oura and Clue, we can see it, but unless it's in partnership with these other institutions, it's not going to have the impact that we might all hope in terms of changing guidelines.
Yeah, in a way, I hope it does actually lead to almost like a protection of healthcare data, because unfortunately at the moment data has become a dirty word, and it has been muddied by the likes of Meta and Facebook and Twitter and all these companies who are using your data to generate algorithms to make you buy more and serve you things that serve them from a monetary perspective. And I think that healthcare data needs to be protected, because in a very short time, using a year's worth of our data, we could change, I don't say history, I say her story, for the better forever. And that is something that I wish all women would opt in to share their fertility data, Oura data, so that they can say, I consent to this being used because it will help women. And we are starved of data when it comes to being able to generate diagnostic value, to generate clinical solutions, to generate further pharmaceutical interventions that will help people. So I'm very hopeful that something will come up and create a shrine of healthcare data, because it is so valuable and should be considered very separate to the rest of the types of data that are collected. Okay. Love this. Thank you. Any data on strength training impact based on users who report strength training versus not? Hannah?
Well, we don't have data on strength training specifically within Oura. What I can say is we know that there is a link between the loss of estrogen and bone mass loss. And so strength training is one of the things that becomes very, very important as you age into your 40s and 50s. And I would posit going forward. And the more you can strength train, the better. I do it once a week myself, and I've started to make sure that I do that as I've entered my late 40s. Rhiannon, I'm not sure if you see any more of that, or Helen.
We don't have data on that. I mean, Helen, I think the data on strength training and longevity is pretty clear and has been examined in a lot of different studies.
Yeah, it's a lot more valuable than, for example, taking vitamin D and calcium supplements. Strength training actually, if you think about your bones as being live organs, and you think of the bone density that you have, the osteoclasts and osteoblasts that are the bone forming cells within your bones start to really produce more up on any form of pressure that you put on them. The fun fact is that's the reason why astronauts go to space and are given strength training programs. It's not because they're bored up in space, it's because the lack of gravity and therefore pressure on any of their joints means that the acceleration of bone density loss is so much faster in space. We're not in space, even though it feels like we're in the Stone Age when it comes to, we know more about space, definitely. So that is why strength training is so important to building up, because that is exactly how our bones react to any bit of pressure that is put on them is that they will start to strengthen a lot more. So it's really important to do that just from a physiological perspective. Do you others have any terms for this pre-perimenopausal stage? No, I think we need one. We have coined the term menopause because we all want to know when we're going to go through menopause. So yeah, we're calling it menopause because it's like this what if and when, and yet there's no definition. But hopefully we can, with enough data, we'll be able to actually put a medical classification on this pre-perimenopausal stage. If you think about it, everything is it's constantly changing. It's an evolution. It's not like one day you wake up and you're perimenopausal. It is a gradual change over many years, and sometimes that happens, and symptoms are accelerated. And sometimes lifestyle factors can accelerate perimenopause. So smoking, vaping, they can actually accelerate onset of perimenopause as well. So I think once we get that definition, regardless of that definition, we should be talking about it. Is it possible to access Hertility via Bupa? No, hound them for it, because no health insurer offers dedicated women's health support. So all of us should be rallying to be available through insurance. To HRT or not, personally, I know that's a very personal question. For me, in my I was going to say educated experience, but actually I don't think there's no such thing as a menopause expert, because there simply isn't enough data for anyone in the world to be an expert in perimenopause or menopause. But for me, I think yes. But we can chat about that another time. Let me just see. I'm trying to do questions that are. What is the solution to get rid of symptoms? So all of us are giving you methods to log your symptoms, test your hormones, understand when those symptoms are happening. But what is the solution to get rid of symptoms? First, I think, is acknowledging them, because as Hannah said, we gaslight ourselves. The biggest blocker to us getting medical attention is, more often than anything else, us saying it's probably nothing, or I'll be fine. We will treat our pets before we treat ourselves. And I think once you start to see metrics that really impact that, and that is logging your symptoms, looking at your hormones, seeing something on, I was going to say paper, on a screen that shows you something is happening, that is when you can start to really look at this multifaceted aspect of your health, whether it's strength training, whether it's looking at your hormones and getting HRT, whether it's just having a conversation with your family to say, I'm going through some things and you need to be on my side for this. And actually, we should never underestimate that. Or whether it is understanding that sleep is going to hit you hard and you need to prepare better, eliminating alcohol, which can significantly impact your sleep, eliminating the things that actually are going to make your sleep worse, and whether that's people in the bed, or whether it's vices or anything else, it's your screen time. There is a whole thing that you can do to preserve your sleep hygiene, to preserve your cardiovascular health through HRT or exercise, to preserve your bone health through strength training. This is really about investing in, number one, understanding what's happening to your body so you're not spiraling out of control. But number two, using your own data to be your best friend and your ally, and say, I think I know my body better than anyone else, and I think I know now is the time to invest in those changes. And maybe it's going to be a little bit not enjoyable. Christ, it's like Halloween when you talk about perimenopause. It really is. Sometimes I get to the end of a lecture about perimenopause and I'm like, it gets worse, because and all I want to do is give some light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's why we were quite excited about joining forces to use technology to better inform women. Because maybe if somebody isn't all of a sudden hit with a hot flash and saying, what just happened to me? Oh God, it's happening. Or, as we've heard many women report, they thought they had dementia or were going through Alzheimer's or something like this. If you actually know and can look something in the face and say, you, my friend, we're going to sit down and talk, then maybe it won't be as, devastating as for the many women who've just been in the dark completely. Didn't mean to be grim there or too much, but I think the more we know, the more we can do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My beloved grandmother, who was a real character, I think many of us have grandmothers like that, she always used to say to me, Rhiannon, aging's not for wimps. And it's not, right? Like you kind of got to train for it and be ready. And this is all the, all of what we're looking at here.
Exactly. And actually it's often described as this post-menopause is described as the spring of your life, so that like everything's your creativity comes back post. So there is definitely light.
I do think, though, just it's important to put a fine point on the fact that no two perimenopausal journeys look the same. So your best friend might have gaps in her period length, and she might have hot flashes, and you might have brain fog and emotional distress, but very regular periods.
Yeah.
Both could be perimenopause, and it's so important. That's why the tracking and the self-knowledge and the acknowledgement that really these things are not necessarily always all the same. There is no answer. We're not going to go get a test that says definitively you're here. And I think that it's really important for all of us to support each other and understand that our journeys are varied. I think there's over 50 different perimenopausal symptoms alone. And your particular combination could be any of the above, but acknowledging that and owning that I might have perimenopause and I can do something about it through, all of the tools that are available to women now, especially Oura and Hertility and Clue, definitely is the right start.
Yeah, for sure. There are lots of questions still to get through. One is here, there's a lot of them are about hormones and recognizing or about actions that you can do. So one is, how are hormone levels in perimenopause linked to health conditions later in life, such as osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, and early onset dementia? They're inextricably linked. So we know that this decline in estrogen is categorically linked to our bone health because of the link with estrogen, because the necessity of estrogen in our bones, in our cardiovascular health, with that's why we get vasomotor symptoms in our neurocognitive health. We have twice the number of estrogen receptors in our brain than men, and as a result, women are twice as likely, or if not 3 times more likely, to get Alzheimer's, dementia, and neurocognitive conditions. These are linked with this decline in estrogen. So I would say understanding where you are in your perimenopausal transition, understanding where your hormones are, or if you had the desire or fear of replacing them. I think there's been so much, unfortunately, incorrect assumptions around HRT. And it would be really interesting to start to log from a Oura perspective, Clue perspective, fertility perspective, the people who are on HRT versus not, and the number of symptoms that are tagged or reported for those who are taking estrogen replacement and those who are not. Not to suggest that it's not, every woman is quite different. Some people will take systemic estrogen, which is like that they will take a tablet, and local estrogen, which won't go throughout your whole bloodstream, and it will revolutionize their lives. For others, they still feel like it's a bit of a battle and they need to modulate between different, and for other people, they really don't feel like they need any hormonal treatment at all. So each person is quite different, but it's worth investing in understanding which type of individual you are. And maybe you'll, even if for a short time, you can log those symptoms and track those metrics on your heart rate variability to see if it's made a difference to you. There's a question here about ethnicity. So we know that Black women report vasomotor symptoms for longer and are more severely affected by vasomotor symptoms. We also know that women of South Asian origin will go into perimenopause on average 4 years earlier, which means that when you have that conversation with your healthcare provider, or when you have that conversation with yourself, be prepared to know that this average age of 51 is a very Western average and does a disservice to the different demographics of women around the world who will experience perimenopause either earlier or a little bit later. So many questions, but what we have 5 minutes left. I love to just try and spitball as many of these questions as possible, but I also we will summarize the most frequent questions that we get, and we're going to send a recording of this webinar out to everyone with all of the codes for use, and hopefully we can do this again and really just get to some of the additional questions that people have asked. Yeah, I'm trying to read as fast as I can. Okay, everyone's asking about the clinical trials. So we actually have an hour research page on the Hertility website. So if you go to the research page from the Hertility website, which I hope is still up because we're just trying to play around with the website. If not, you should be able to email us research@hertilityhealth.com. What other? Guys, feel free to talk while I read these questions and try and summarize them. Hopefully we can do this again in a year's time with our full report of the three of us.
I think the one thing to just like continue to harp on, to continue to make space for, is we are all so different, and that's what makes us the same. Every woman who bleeds goes through this, and it's something that is not tracked. It's not recorded. Doctors are not really taught about this. The Mayo Clinic did a study and found that doctors were just not taught, and those that were still were unsure about what they were taught about perimenopause and menopause. And so trust in yourself. If you have a question, ask it. Ask your girlfriends. You know, I have a group of women that I spend time every week with, and the last few years, the entire topic of conversation every single week has been perimenopause. What am I going to do? Is this perimenopause?
Menopause.
The answer is right. It could be, maybe, but and you know, our mothers were taught to just live through it, and we are kind of coming to the point now where we don't have to. And so continuing to raise your voices, be an advocate, but believe yourself more than anything else. If you think something is changing about your body, no one knows your body as well as you do. Your doctor does not own the definition of right and wrong. Your doctor can help you understand it, but make sure you trust yourself. And it all starts with, Helen, you're right, paper, writing things down or tracking them in wonderful apps like Clue. Like, there are so many things that you can do to just keep track of your own information. And that is the power of truth. That is the power of data.
I think that was beautifully summarized. Beautifully summarized. We have so many questions on different aspects of menopausal health. Please know that we have a number of webinars, if you look on the Hertility YouTube, on menopause, and hopefully they will be helpful for you. We are now linked, and we'll be definitely up for doing another one of these sessions together, just to hopefully share some insights. If anyone already does track their cycles with Clue, does wear an wearable or wear their Oura ring, and has done a Hertility test, we'd love to hear from you. If you haven't, please do so. And you can download the Hertility app then, and you can also start to book appointments so that we can really work together with you to see how can we get women in this perimenopausal stage and start to learn about this transition. It's not about over medicalizing it. It's about, you can never over educate yourself or anyone else about something that's going to happen to your body. So let's help each other and everyone else to come, so that we can all get through this together, and hopefully use data for good. So it's been amazing to have you, Hannah, from Oura. It's been wonderful to have you, Rhiannon, from Clue. And thank you to everybody who joined the webinar. Please do keep in touch and let us know if there's any other topics you want us to cover. And if we didn't get to your questions, we will be summarizing them and sending out an email. So please look out for the email with the codes and the recording afterwards. So take care, everyone.
Thanks all.